So, thank you everyone for joining me. I'm Kari Weaver. I'm the program manager for the OCUL Artificial Intelligence and Machine Learning program. And today I am delighted to welcome Lynn Long as our special guest on the topic of artificial intelligence and human rights. Lynn is a senior education and learning specialist with the Conflict Management Office at the University of Waterloo. With over 2 decades of experience in adult education, she specializes in informal conflict resolution strategies, including workplace assessments, conflict coaching, mediation, and the design of educational initiatives that build individual and organizational capacity for navigating conflict effectively. Lynn holds a variety of education-focused degrees and is a PhD candidate. She also holds a certificate in conflict management and mediation. And over the past 16 years, she has worked closely with faculty, staff, and students to develop and deliver human rights-based educational programs that help individuals understand and apply human rights principles within their unique workplace and educational contexts. Currently, Lynn is pursuing her PhD at the Democritus University of Thrace, where her research explores the use of artificial intelligence to enhance learning in immersive environments, with a focus on identifying best practices for implementation in higher education. Her work reflects a deep commitment to innovation in teaching and learning and to supporting faculty, staff, and students in cultivating strong collaborative relationships. Lynn, we are so delighted to have you today to speak with us for just a little bit about human rights. To start us off, could you give us a little bit of context about the intersection between human rights and artificial intelligence?
Well, thanks for inviting me, Kari. I certainly can. Kari, the truth is that AI and human rights are deeply connected because AI systems are increasingly a part of the technologies, decisions, and processes that impact our day-to-day lives. Sometimes they're used in ways that promote and protect human rights, but sometimes they're used in ways that undermine our human rights. Let me give you a couple of examples. In a recent EDUCAUSE review article, Rob Gibson discusses how AI has been used for many years to support accessibility and inclusion. It underpins many of the accessibility technologies used by our students on our own campuses. Gibson describes how the arrival of generative AI has not only expanded the scope of these technologies, it has made them less costly, faster, and easier to use. Because of the decreasing costs and increasing speed and power of these new technologies, large-scale improvements are much more feasible. So this is one example of how AI can be used to promote human rights. But when misused, these powerful technologies can easily head in the other direction. For example, you might be aware of a recent CBC News investigation of AI-generated TikTok videos that were used to spread racially charged misinformation about immigrants in Canada. These videos did not clearly indicate that they were AI-generated, and they also did not make it clear that they were actually promoting a service. So they were marketing tools. In this case, AI was used in ways that were deceptive and in ways that amplified biases. So they undermined human rights. Sometimes negative human rights impacts, though, happen much less intentionally than in this example. An example that comes to mind is vending machines that were brought onto our own campus back in 2023 and 2024. They were described as being able to recommend preferred snacks to patrons. And users were not informed, though, that this ability was actually due to the use of AI facial analysis software. Once users became aware of this, it raised concerns around privacy and surveillance, and the vending machines were removed. So the key takeaway here is that AI and human rights are very connected, but it's not necessarily AI itself that's problematic. Rather, it's how the AI is designed and how the AI is used that determine whether it positively or negatively impacts human rights.
So that's really interesting. There's such a strong connection, but it's the human element that really makes the difference in whether human rights are upheld or negatively impacted. So, our reading this month focuses on human rights in a broader international context. Could you speak to the relationship between these collective values and our specific context with the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms and the Ontario Human Rights Code here in Ontario?
Absolutely, Kari. The principles that underpin global human rights frameworks like the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the pieces of European legislation mentioned in the reading, principles like fairness, transparency, and the right to equitable treatment, these are the same principles that underpin our federal and provincial legislation as well. Here in Canada, at the federal level, the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms protects freedom of expression, freedom of assembly, freedom of association, and it protects us from discrimination. There are other protections laid out in this legislation as well, but these are the ones most pertinent to our discussion of AI. At a provincial level, the Ontario Human Rights Code builds on these principles by specifically laying out the areas in which we're protected from discrimination. These include employment, housing, education, and more. The Ontario Human Rights Code also details the types of discrimination that are prohibited. It lays out 17 prohibited grounds, which include age, race, gender, sexual orientation, and more. As I mentioned, there's 17 of them. So the code prohibits discrimination based on any of these grounds. So both globally and locally, there are common principles laid out in human rights legislation that can and should inform how we choose and use the AI in our libraries and academic settings.
And I think that's very helpful too, because understanding that the basis of human rights, the values of human rights are fairly consistent across legal jurisdictions, which helps us to understand not only how to translate these things to our environment, but also um, how much we can look to the broader international context to help us think about how to engage with AI as there's great global experimentation currently in this area. So, our reading this month brings up a number of potential harms of AI systems, particularly in relation to liberty and justice, privacy, and freedom of expression. What do you see as the concerns in these areas, and how might these risks be mitigated? Are there any specialized considerations in education related to these potential harms as well?
That's a great question, Kari. I'm going to take a look at these topics individually. And before I do that, I wanted to mention as well that I have put together a list of links to some of the resources and articles that I'm mentioning today. So I'll provide that to you to share with those who have followed along here. But back to the question, I'm going to begin by looking at privacy. So AI systems often rely on collecting and analyzing large amounts of personal data. In a library, that might include data related to what users search for, what they borrow, or what they read. If that data is collected, stored, or shared without consent, it could violate privacy rights. If a student knows that information is being collected, it could have an inhibitive impact. They may, for example, be reluctant to search certain topics for fear of some sort of negative impact. AI exam proctoring tools are another example of AI's potential impact on privacy. These technologies were used during the pandemic to prevent cheating. They're capable of tracking students' eye movements and keystrokes and even monitoring their surroundings. And they've been criticized for being invasive and also for being discriminatory. So these technologies not only potentially violate a student's privacy, but also because of their embedded biases, can also compromise fairness. And I believe that was one of the other topics that you mentioned. So let's take a closer look at fairness. AI systems trained on biased data will produce biased outcomes. It's a fact. If we try to convince ourselves that we can remove the bias when the bias was there from the outset embedded in the data, then we're deceiving ourselves. But what we can do when we're choosing an AI technology is first, take the time to determine, as best we can, what biases are present in the technology, and then consider exactly how we'll be using that technology. And finally, assess what the potential impact might be on the users. Once we've gathered all of that information, then we can make an informed decision about, first of all, whether this is the right technology to be using in a specific situation, and secondly, what limitations we should put on its use to mitigate the impact of the identified biases. So finally, let's take a look at freedom of expression. I've already provided two examples of how AI could potentially impact freedom of expression on a university campus, one positive and one negative. On the positive side, AI tools that help with language translation, speech-to-text software, and other similar technologies can help students, staff, and faculty with diverse backgrounds and abilities participate more fully in academic discussion. There's a great practical guide that I'm including in the links that I'm going to share with you, put together by Lynn Long, that talks specifically about artificial intelligence and assistive technologies. On the negative side, though, when AI is used to monitor and surveil, potentially collecting data in a library via those vending machines that I referred to or through exam proctoring software, it can lead individuals to change their behavior. People often begin to self-censor when they feel that they're being watched. So as AI becomes embedded in more and more of our systems and processes, we need to be intentionally considering how it could impact students, staff, and faculty's freedom to be themselves, freedom to gather with others, and freedom to discuss topics of importance to them.
Thank you for that. It's certainly a difficult area to navigate, and as you've laid out, positive but also negative applications. But I think that connection between um, the use of AI and that surveillance function is definitely something for library workers across our OCUL member institutions to think about in their work contexts, but also something to bring up and really surface in their campus communities. Because libraries have often been at the center of conversations about censorship and surveillance. So it's an area I think we have quite a lot of insight into in our field. Um, Turning our attention to the people who create these AI systems, what responsibilities do developers and users, us, of AI systems have in ensuring that these technologies do not perpetuate unjust bias or discrimination?
Well, it's really a shared responsibility, Kari. Developers have a responsibility to evaluate the data that they use to train systems and to test their systems for bias and to make sure that they work well for users of all sorts. But users, including educators and librarians and administrators, also have an important role to play. They need to be asking questions before adopting an AI tool. Questions like, what data was used to train this system? Does it work equally well for all users? How can I best ensure transparency so that users know how AI is being used in this specific setting? Can people opt out of using the AI tool, or can they challenge the decisions that it makes? Really asking the right questions, by asking them, we can really help ensure that the AI tools that we use align with human rights principles. And actually, I've created a guide for educators to help them in asking these questions, knowing what questions to ask, really. Um, it's a resource called the AI Human Rights Impact Assessment for Educators. I like to call it the AIRI for short. And this tool was inspired by a tool developed by the Ontario Human Rights Commission, which is the body that oversees the Ontario Human Rights Code. It was a collaborative effort between the Commission and the Ontario Law Commission. And their tool was developed for organizations generally, but the area was developed specifically for educational settings. So this is a structured guide that walks users step by step through the process of identifying benefits, assessing risks, and developing strategies to mitigate them. Because it was designed specifically for educational settings, it also considers the impact of the AI technology on student learning and on achievement of learning outcomes. I've worked with experts across various disciplines in creating this tool, and one of the outcomes of that process was the development of a parallel tool for students considering using AI in a course or in an assignment. Both of these are open resources, so they're available for free on our office's website. And I'll include a link to these tools as well in the list that I have for you, Kari.
And thank you so much for your willingness to tell us about AIRI and all of your work in this area. These are amazing tools, both as an educator and in working directly with students. And I'm sure that many of our folks at our OCUL member institutions out there have been struggling trying to figure out what are the right questions to ask. So simply knowing that there are wonderful resources developed by you in collaboration with others with expertise across areas, I think is incredibly helpful. Um, so with that, you've obviously developed an educator and a student-facing tool that you've adapted from an existing human rights framework. How can existing human rights frameworks generally be adapted or expanded to address the unique challenges posed by artificial intelligence?
Well, in Canada and around the world, many of our existing human rights laws can be and have been applied to AI, but they weren't designed with AI in mind. So there are updates that need to be made. For example, the right to privacy, it needs to be updated to address things like algorithmic profiling and biometric data collection, issues that didn't exist when these laws were written. So here in Canada, in 2022, we introduced the Artificial Intelligence and Data Act, but it's still under review. So there's no law in place, but Canada has released a voluntary code of conduct on responsible development and management of generative AI systems. And in Ontario, as I mentioned, the Ontario Human Rights Commission has partnered with the Law Commission to create their AI Human Rights Impact Assessment tool. Globally, many countries are in a similar position to Canada. They're developing guidelines while working towards creating enforceable laws. The European Union is leading the way, really, and that's reflected in the reading that we had with their comprehensive human rights focused AI Act.
Wonderful. And because of the relationship between the common values, we can really benefit from a lot of that work in the European Union to help us in
Absolutely.
our own journey.
Mm-hmm.
Um, all right. So we're almost at the end of our conversation today, Lynn. So one final big question for you. What role should education and public awareness play in promoting ethical and rights respecting uses of AI technologies?
Well, Kari, I believe that education plays a crucial role in ensuring that AI is used ethically and responsibly. The more people understand how AI works and what questions to ask, the better equipped they are to engage critically and thoughtfully. Libraries are a great place for this kind of learning because they can foster open access to information and support digital literacy across communities. I know that the University of Waterloo has launched an open online course called Artificial Intelligence and Society that they've made available to students, faculty, and staff to help them think critically about AI and its societal impacts. And your own AI and machine learning program at OCUL supports education around ethical AI use in academic libraries. So these are just two examples, but there's many great initiatives out there promoting education in this area to help build understanding and promote responsible use of AI in education here in Ontario.
So definitely an area of focus and more to come all the time. But certainly a great opportunity in general and specifically for libraries to really be involved in this educational effort. Well, this has been a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much, Lynn, for joining me today and discussing a number of these issues around artificial intelligence and human rights. We will be having some upcoming discussions, which OCUL members are welcome to attend, and Lynn is certainly invited to as well. So we look forward to seeing you all there.
Thanks, Kari. I hope to be able to participate in those, and I was glad to be here.